My mom smells like pee. Melissa's voice cracked across the dining room like glass shattering on a marble floor. For one suspended moment, the Parker family's Thanksgiving table suddenly froze. Forks stopped midair. The steam from the turkey curled in silence. My breath caught, as if the air itself had been knocked out of me. Then the laughter erupted. Jason, my son-in-law, slammed his palm on the table, nearly spilling his wine, his body shaking from laughter. Ethan, 12 years old, howled so hard he coughed into his mashed potatoes. Sophia, only 10, squealed and clapped as though it were the best joke she'd ever heard. And Melissa, my only daughter, the child I had worked myself to the bone to raise, sat back smugly in her chair, smiling as if she had finally exposed the ridiculous woman who had given her everything. The laughter echoed through the house I had spent 40 years paying for. On this night, across Austin, families bowed their heads, thanking God for their blessings. In my house, I had become the entertainment, the punchline, the ghost who carried everyone but was valued by no one. I stood with the breadbasket trembling in my hands, my cheeks burning red, my chest tight with humiliation. My mouth opened, then closed again. To protest would only fuel their cruelty. So I forced myself to move, setting the bread on the table, lowering myself into my chair as though I had not just been gutted in front of the people I loved most. Jason raised his glass with a crooked smile. To Mom, always keeping us laughing. More laughter, more clinking of forks, and I sat there invisible. Invisible, but suddenly awake. The rest of the dinner blurred into static. Melissa complained about her retail job, about rude customers and long hours. Jason muttered about possible opportunities at firms he hadn't applied to. The kids argued about which movie they wanted to see over the weekend. None of them noticed the tremor in my hands as I cut into my turkey. None of them cared that my silence had weight. When the plates were empty, I cleared the table alone. Jason was already sprawled on the couch, the television humming with the football game. Melissa scrolled on her phone. The children sprawled on the carpet, still giggling. I carried heavy dishes back and forth, my shoulders aching, my chest hollow. In the kitchen, I plunged my hands into scalding water. The soap bubbles blurred as my tears fell silently into the sink. I stared at my reflection in the blackened window, and the woman staring back was a stranger. Wrinkles from decades of labor. Eyes clouded with exhaustion. A body stooped from sacrifice. Lord, I whispered, my voice breaking, what did I do to deserve this? Did I give too much? Did I let them believe I was nothing but someone to use? The words twisted in my chest, but something else stirred with them, something sharper. For years, I had explained away the insults. Melissa was stressed. Jason was frustrated. The kids were too young to know better. I told myself that love meant patience, that silence was strength, that enduring pain for the sake of family was noble. But tonight, on Thanksgiving, the day of gratitude, they made me the joke. And suddenly, the silence I had clung to felt like weakness, not strength. Later that night, lying in bed, the house quiet around me, I heard voices drifting through the floorboards. Melissa's voice, low and casual, like she was talking about the weather. Jason, maybe after the holidays we should really put Mom in a nursing home. It'd be better for everyone. Jason chuckled, unbothered. Yeah, finally, some peace. My body went rigid, my breath caught in my chest. So that was it. It wasn't enough that they laughed at me. They were planning to erase me, to move me out of my own house, the house I bought, the house I maintained. To throw me away like an old piece of furniture. And in that moment, something inside me hardened. I wasn't powerless. They didn't know about the savings accounts, the investments, the decades of quiet planning. They didn't realize that every luxury in their lives, their clothes, their trips, the food on their plates came not from Jason's empty promises or Melissa's part-time wages, but from me, always me. For the first time in years, I didn't feel weak, I felt clear. The next morning, I woke up before the sun, as I always had. Old habits die hard. For decades, I had trained my body to rise early, to prepare breakfast, to lay out clothes, to shoulder the invisible weight that kept this family standing. But this morning, something was different. There was no heaviness in my bones, no quiet dread as I slipped on my robe. Instead, I felt something sharp, electric, running through my veins. For the first time in years, I had clarity, I brewed coffee in silence, the bitter steam rising into the dim kitchen. Jason stumbled down the stairs in his pajamas, scratching his head, expecting his usual morning feast. Melissa followed an hour later, complaining about her long shift ahead at the store. The children clattered down, whining about being late for school. I moved like clockwork, preparing eggs, toast, juice, their lunches. But inside, I was already somewhere else. Watching them chew, watching them argue, watching Jason scroll lazily through his phone, I realized how blind they were. None of them asked how I felt. None of them noticed the shadows beneath my eyes. To them, I was the house itself. Walls that didn't speak, hands that never rested, a body that simply functioned. But not for much longer. When the house emptied, when Jason retreated upstairs to his so-called job search, I sat at the kitchen table with my old leather notebook. In those pages, for years, I had quietly recorded every penny saved, every bill paid, every sacrifice made. My handwriting told the story of my life, numbers scratched in the margins, interest rates circled, notes of future dreams that I had buried for Melissa's sake. I opened to the last page and began writing a new list, not of sacrifices, but of steps toward my freedom. Bank appointment. Call my cousin Martha. Contact attorney Lewis. Find an apartment. My pen pressed hard into the paper. Each word was a promise. By Monday morning, I was ready for step 1. I dressed more carefully than usual. A navy blue dress I hadn't worn since Melissa's graduation. Pearl earrings Jason once mocked as old-fashioned. I walked past Jason in the living room as he hunched over the laptop, pretending to be busy. "Where are you going?" he asked absently. "To the bank," I said simply. He didn't even look up. "Don't forget milk on the way back." I almost laughed. Milk. He thought I was running errands for his children, as always. He had no idea I was walking out the door to reclaim decades of my life. At the Bank of America branch downtown, my account manager, Mr. Ryan, greeted me warmly. He had known me for over a decade, always polite, always professional. But as I began to explain my family's mockery, their freeloading, their whispers about shoving me into a nursing home, his expression darkened. "Mrs. Parker," he said softly, "what you're describing is financial and emotional abuse, more common than you think." The words hit me with both pain and validation. Abuse. That was the name for what I had endured. "Then it ends today," I told him firmly. We canceled the automatic transfers Jason used to pay the bills with my accounts. We closed the credit card Melissa had carried for years, swiping for groceries, clothes, and luxuries, while I quietly covered the debt. We even transferred a large portion of my investments into a new account at another bank, an account only I knew about. "From now on," Ryan said, sliding the papers toward me, "you alone control your money. No one else has access." I signed my name with a trembling hand, not from fear, but from release. The invisible chains were falling, one stroke of ink at a time. When I left the bank, the morning sun felt warmer, sharper, as if the city itself had shifted. I wasn't the same Eleanor who had walked in. That woman had been invisible, taken for granted, mocked. The Eleanor who stepped out was someone else entirely. A woman with a plan. Step 2 was Martha. That afternoon, I dialed her number from the kitchen phone. My cousin had always been the one person in the family who treated me with respect. When I told her everything, the dinner humiliation, Melissa's cruel words, Jason's laughter, the whispered plan to send me away, Martha's fury crackled through the line. "Ellie, you are not going to let them treat you like this another day," she said firmly. "You come stay with me as long as you need. My home is your home." Tears welled in my eyes at her kindness. "Thank you, Martha. But this time, I don't just want a place to stay. I want a new life. My own life." "You'll have it," she promised. Step 3 was attorney David Lewis. On Tuesday morning, I sat in his downtown office, the heavy oak furniture surrounding us like a courtroom. He listened carefully as I laid out the years of sacrifice, the recent mockery, and my fear that Melissa and Jason might try to control my assets. "Mrs. Parker," he said gravely, "we can protect you. We'll update your will, cancel the old version, and create legal documents confirming your full mental capacity. That way, no one can challenge your right to manage your own estate." His words filled me with both relief and sorrow. That my own daughter might attempt to declare me incompetent, yes, I could see it now. She who laughed at me, she who saw me as a burden, she who never asked how the bills were paid. Cancel the old will, I said. For now, no one inherits, not until I decide who truly deserves it. Lewis nodded, his pen moving quickly across the forms. As I signed, I felt a surge of strength. They wanted to erase me, to push me aside. Instead, I was erasing their entitlement. Step 4 was finding my new beginning. The real estate agent, a young woman named Patricia, showed me several apartments. The first was too cramped, the second too noisy. But the third made my heart stir. A modest 2-bedroom on the edge of a quiet neighborhood, surrounded by oaks and a small park where seniors walked their dogs. Sunlight streamed through wide windows. The air smelled of possibility. It's perfect, I told Patricia. Do you want to place a deposit? Yes. I wrote the check on the spot, 2 months deposit and first month's rent. For the first time in decades, I was spending money not on Melissa, not on her children, not on Jason, but on myself. When I returned home that evening, Jason was still at his computer, the screen reflecting in his glasses. Melissa was berating the children about homework. No one asked where I had been. No one noticed the lightness in my step. And why would they? To them, I was still the same invisible woman. They had no idea the ground beneath their feet was already shifting. The week passed in silence, but in my silence, I was planning. Each night I sorted documents, the deed to the house, my birth certificate, my insurance policies. I packed discreetly, piece by piece. A few dresses, my favorite sweater, shoes comfortable enough for walking. I kept it hidden under my bed, a small suitcase holding my freedom. On Saturday morning, over breakfast, Melissa cleared her throat. "Mom, I was talking to my cousin Lisa," she said casually. "She has a spare room. Maybe you could move in with her soon. It'd be good for everyone." Jason nodded quickly. "I could finally have an office. The kids would get more space, and Lisa's your age, you'd have company." I stirred my coffee, forcing a small smile. Inside, I was already laughing. They thought they were planning my future. They didn't know I had already planned my departure. "Maybe," I said softly. "We'll see." Their relief was visible. They thought I had agreed, but in my heart, the decision was already made. Sunday night, after they all went to bed, I sat at the kitchen table under the dim lamp and wrote a letter. Not a note of apology, not a plea for understanding, a declaration. I told them everything. That I had carried them for years, that I had been mocked and dismissed, that I had listened to their whispers, that I was leaving, that the house was mine, legally and financially, and they had 1 month to find their own way. I left a detailed list of bills, electricity, gas, water, school fees, every cost they had never noticed, but I had always paid. I ended with a final line: "When you are ready to treat me with respect, I will decide if I want to hear from you again." I folded the letter neatly, placed it on the table with the spare keys, and carried my suitcase upstairs. At 5 a.m., I rose quietly, bathed, dressed, and slipped out of the house. The taxi I had arranged waited at the corner. I did not look back, not at the house, not at the garden I had tended, not at the family who had taken everything and given me contempt in return. By 7 a.m., I was standing in my new apartment, the keys warm in my palm. The rooms were bare, the air smelled of fresh paint, but it felt alive with promise. I sat on the floor, leaned my back against the wall, and whispered to myself, "This is mine, finally, mine." The silence was the first thing that hit them. For years, the house had stirred awake before sunrise. The rattle of pans, the hum of the coffee maker, the smell of toast drifting upstairs. My footsteps, my rhythm, my invisible presence weaving the household together before anyone else even opened their eyes. But on that Monday morning, the house was cold. The kitchen table was bare. There was no scent of breakfast, no coffee bubbling on the stove, no folded lunches packed in neat brown bags. Ethan had been the first to notice. His voice carried up the stairs. "Mom, Grandma didn't make breakfast." Melissa stormed down in her robe, irritation already sparking. Jason shuffled after her, bleary-eyed, thinking Ethan was exaggerating. But when Melissa entered the kitchen, she saw it. The letter. My neat handwriting. The keys placed deliberately beside it. And beneath them, the printed list of bills, mortgage, utilities, groceries, tuition, insurance, all expenses they had never bothered to calculate. Melissa picked up the paper, her lips moving as she read silently, her face drained of color. Jason leaned in over her shoulder, scanning line after line, his smirk fading with every sentence. By the end, he was pale. "She's gone," Melissa whispered. "She really left." Jason's voice cracked. "She can't. She just can't. Where would she even go?" Ethan tugged at Melissa's sleeve. "But who's gonna make breakfast?" Sophia's eyes widened with panic. "And what about my field trip money? Grandma said she'd give it today." Their questions tumbled into the silence, but no one had answers. For the first time, the household machine had broken down, and they were realizing, piece by piece, how much of that machine had been me. Meanwhile, at that very hour, I was standing in my new apartment, sunlight pouring through the bare windows. My suitcase sat open on the floor. The walls were white, the rooms empty, but I felt a warmth I hadn't felt in years. Freedom. I made myself coffee in the small kitchenette, savoring each sip slowly. No one interrupted, no one demanded. The only sound was the hum of the refrigerator. I sat on the floor with my cup, leaning against the wall, and for the first time in decades, I tasted peace. Back at the old house, chaos was unraveling. Melissa tried calling me, but the number was already disconnected. She tried Martha, but Martha, as promised, told her nothing. Jason called the bank, attempting to use old account numbers, but the accounts had been moved, access denied. By noon, Melissa was pacing the kitchen. Jason sat with his laptop, a grim expression on his face. Ethan and Sophia argued about lunch, who would make it, what they would eat. Their stomachs growled, their parents snapped. "Why didn't you see this coming?" Melissa hissed at Jason. "You should have known she was planning something." Jason bristled. "Me? You're her daughter? Shouldn't you have noticed?" They turned on each other, each blaming the other, while the children sat silent, eyes wide, realizing for the first time that the stability of their world had cracked. By evening, reality hit harder. Bills were stacked on the counter where I had left them. Electricity, gas, mortgage, tuition all due soon. Melissa flipped through them with shaking hands. "How are we supposed to pay all this?" she whispered. Jason rubbed his temples. I'll find work, something temporary." Melissa snapped. "You've been saying that for 8 months." His silence said more than words ever could. While they argued, I was unpacking. Slowly, carefully, I placed my clothes in the small dresser, my favorite sweater folded neatly. A framed photo of myself on the night of my 50th birthday, smiling, genuinely smiling, set on the bedside table. I didn't bring much. I didn't need much. Everything I owned that truly mattered was already with me. My documents, my freedom, my dignity. The furniture delivery arrived in the afternoon. A bed, a table with 2 chairs, a small sofa. The men set it up quickly, and when they left, I stood in the middle of my new living room, breathing it in. This space was mine, every object, every corner, every choice mine. For the first time in decades, I didn't have to ask permission or explain myself. That night, I cooked a simple dinner, 1 plate, 1 portion, seasoned exactly how I liked. I ate slowly, in silence, savoring each bite. Then I sat by the window, watching the park across the street as the sun dipped low. People walked their dogs, couples strolled, children rode bicycles. Life moved gently, and for once, I was part of it, not as a servant, not as a ghost, but as myself. Back in the old house, dinner was chaos. Melissa had tried to throw something together, overcooked pasta, a jar of sauce, but the children complained. Jason grumbled about the taste. The table, once full of laughter at my expense, was now filled with bickering. Ethan muttered, "Grandma's food was better." Melissa slammed her fork down. "Then go live with Grandma." The words stung her even as she said them. She realized, with a pang, that they didn't know where I was, and that maybe they never would. That night, lying awake in my new bed, I imagined them stumbling through the routines I had carried for years. I pictured Jason fumbling with bills, Melissa failing to stretch her part-time wages, the children realizing their comfort had always been borrowed from me. I didn't smile out of cruelty. I smiled because finally they would learn. The days turned into a week. For me, it was a rebirth. I woke when I wanted, walked in the park, met neighbors, women my age, many of them also living independently. Mrs. Rosa, divorced after 40 years, Mrs. Carmen, who had left her son's home after years of disrespect, Mrs. Patricia, widowed, choosing to begin again. We gathered in the afternoons on the park benches, sharing stories, laughing about things only women our age could understand. For the first time in years, I felt part of a community not built on obligation but on choice. For Melissa and Jason, the week was a descent. Jason finally took a job low pay at an auto parts store, but it barely covered groceries. Melissa tried adding hours at the store, but even then, the bills loomed like shadows. The mortgage payment approached. The children's tuition was due. Melissa sat at the kitchen table one night, head in her hands, the unpaid bills spread before her like a battlefield. Jason's voice was bitter. "She should have told us. She shouldn't have left like this." Melissa's reply was sharp. "We treated her like garbage. Why would she stay?" Jason glared. "She abandoned us." "She didn't abandon us," Melissa whispered. "She freed herself." It was the first time she admitted aloud what deep down she already knew. One evening, as I returned from the park, I saw a shadow near my apartment door. Melissa. Her hair was messy, her face pale, her eyes swollen from crying. "Mom," she said softly, her voice trembling. "Can we talk?" I froze. My heart pounded. Part of me wanted to slam the door, to protect the fragile peace I had built. Another part of me, still a mother, still soft beneath the scars, wanted to let her in. She stepped closer, her voice breaking. "We can't do this without you." I looked at her, truly looked at her for the first time in years. She was thinner, her shoulders slumped, her eyes desperate. Not the arrogant daughter who mocked me at the table, but a woman undone by her own choices. I opened the door halfway, but not fully. "Why are you here, Melissa?" I asked. Her lips trembled. "Because I need you." Melissa stood in the dim hallway outside my new apartment, her hands clenched together, her face pale and drawn. I had opened the door halfway, nothing more. Between us stretched not just the narrow gap of the doorway, but decades of love, sacrifice, and betrayal. "Please, Mom," she whispered, "just hear me out." Her eyes were red, her voice cracked with exhaustion. She didn't look like the smug woman who had smirked across the Thanksgiving table. She looked fragile, almost childlike, as if stripped of the armor she had worn for so long. But I didn't forget. I couldn't forget. Her laughter had cut deeper than a knife. Her voice, mocking, had turned me into a spectacle in my own home. And after that, she had whispered about putting me away, discarding me like furniture. I tightened my grip on the doorframe. "Why are you here, Melissa?" Her lips trembled. "Because we can't do this without you." The words hung heavy. They might have pierced me once, but not now. Now I needed clarity. "Do you need me?" I asked softly. "Or do you need my money?" Her silence was deafening. Melissa shifted on her feet, guilt flashing across her face. For the first time, she didn't have a quick retort. No sarcasm, no deflection. She looked down at the floor, biting her lip. Finally, she whispered, "Both." It was the honesty that stung most. I took a deep breath. The old Eleanor, the one who gave everything, who erased herself for the sake of family, would have folded right there. She would have opened the door, embraced her daughter, and surrendered everything again. But I wasn't that woman anymore. "Melissa," I said firmly, "I will not be used, not again. If you want me in your life, it won't be on those terms." Her eyes filled with tears. "Mom, you don't understand, we're drowning. Jason can't find decent work, the bills are piling up, the kids are what?" I interrupted sharply. "Hungry? Cold? Without electricity?" "Melissa, I left money for 1 month's bills." 1 month. I gave you a chance to stand on your own. Have you done it?" She opened her mouth, then closed it. Her silence was answer enough. I remembered her as a child. A little girl in pigtails running through sprinklers, a teenager slamming her bedroom door, a young woman in a wedding dress, tears in her eyes as I handed her the necklace I had saved for years to buy. Every memory clashed against the image of the woman in front of me, the woman who had laughed at me, mocked me, used me. "Mom," she whispered, her voice breaking. "I'm sorry." The words caught me off guard. Melissa had never apologized for anything, not once. Her pride was iron. But now, her face crumpled with regret. I searched her eyes, looking for sincerity. Was it real remorse or just desperation? "Sorry for what?" I asked carefully. She swallowed hard. "For Thanksgiving, for what I said, for laughing, for treating you like you were nothing." Her voice cracked on the last word. Tears stung my eyes despite myself. I turned slightly, hiding them. "You did treat me like nothing." "I know," she whispered, "and I hate myself for it." Her words chipped at the armor I had built. Part of me wanted to believe her, wanted to throw open the door, hold her like I used to, and forget everything. But the other part, the stronger part, remembered the decades of disrespect, the way she had used me as a safety net, the way she had whispered about locking me away. Trust wasn't rebuilt in a hallway. I stepped back, opening the door a fraction wider but not enough to invite her in. "If you want a relationship with me, Melissa, it has to be honest. It has to be real. No more lies. No more using me as your wallet." She nodded quickly, too quickly. "Yes, of course, Mom. I'll change, I swear." But I had lived long enough to know that promises spoken in desperation often crumble once the crisis passes. "Change isn't words," I said. "It's action." Her face fell. "Then what do you want me to do?" I looked at her, really looked at her. "Stand on your own. Show me you can. Until then, my life is mine, and I won't sacrifice it again." Melissa's tears spilled over. "Mom, please. The kids miss you. They keep asking for you." My chest tightened at the thought of Ethan and Sophia, their laughter, their hugs. They were innocent, caught in the mess of their parents' choices. But I had to be careful. If I rushed back, nothing would change. Melissa took a shaky step closer. "Just come see them, please. One dinner. That's all I'm asking." I hesitated. The image of their little faces tugged at my heart. Could I resist forever? Should I? But a sharp thought cut through. Was this about the children or about getting me back into the house, back under their control? I met her eyes. "One dinner," I said finally. "Neutral ground, not your house, not mine. A restaurant, just the kids, you and me, no Jason." She blinked in surprise, then nodded eagerly. Yes, of course, thank you, Mom." Her relief was palpable. She almost reached out to hug me, but I stepped back. I wasn't ready. Not yet. "Wednesday evening," I said. 6 o'clock, at Bella's Diner on 5th. "I'll be there," she promised, wiping her tears. I closed the door gently, leaning against it as my heart pounded. For the first time, the roles had shifted. I wasn't the desperate one anymore, she was. And maybe, just maybe, that was the start of something new. The next 2 days passed slowly. I kept myself busy walking in the park, reading, sharing coffee with Rosa and Carmen. But in quiet moments, my thoughts drifted to the upcoming dinner. Would Melissa truly show remorse? Would she come alone? Would the children look at me with love or confusion? And, more hauntingly, what if it was all just a performance? Wednesday evening arrived. I dressed simply but neatly, a dark skirt, a pale blouse, the necklace Melissa once loved as a child. I arrived early at Bella's Diner, sliding into a booth near the window. The smell of fried chicken and coffee filled the air. At 6:05, the door opened. Ethan and Sophia ran in first, their faces lighting up when they saw me. "Grandma," they shouted in unison, rushing into my arms. I hugged them tightly, my eyes stinging with tears. "Oh, my darlings," I whispered, "I've missed you." Melissa followed, quieter, her expression careful. She slid into the booth across from me. For a moment, it felt almost normal, almost like the family we once were. We ordered food. The children chattered, telling me about school, about friends, about the chaos at home. Melissa sat silently, her eyes darting between us. Finally, she spoke. "Mom, thank you for meeting us. I know I don't deserve it." Her tone was softer, less defensive. Maybe she meant it, or maybe she was calculating. I couldn't yet tell. As the meal went on, I noticed small things. Melissa let the kids speak without snapping. She even laughed softly once or twice, but her eyes kept flicking to me, searching, pleading. And then, as the children ran to the counter for ice cream, Melissa leaned forward. "Mom," she whispered urgently, "we're about to lose the house. The bank is calling. Jason can't handle it. Please, we need your help." There it was. The plea. The hook. The trap. I sat back, my heart heavy. Melissa, I told you my money is not your safety net anymore. Tears filled her eyes. Then we'll be homeless. Is that what you want for your grandchildren? Her words twisted like a knife. She knew exactly where to strike. I closed my eyes, steadying myself. The old Eleanor would have caved, but the woman I was becoming, she knew better. Your children deserve stability, I said quietly. But that stability has to come from you, not from me. If you want my respect back, prove you can provide for them. Until then, I will not be manipulated. Melissa's face crumpled. She looked down, silent, ashamed, or maybe calculating her next move. The envelope lay on my kitchen table like a warning. Plain, white, unmarked except for my name scrawled across the front in block letters. I hadn't heard footsteps outside my door, hadn't seen a shadow. Yet when I returned from the diner with Melissa and the children, there it was waiting for me like a messenger of doom. With trembling fingers, I slid the paper out. Notice of foreclosure. The address printed beneath it was my old house. Their house now, or so they thought. The bank seal glared up at me, cold and official. Payment defaulted. Proceedings initiated. For a moment, I sat frozen. My old kitchen walls blurred. The hum of the refrigerator faded into silence. That house wasn't just wood and brick, it was the story of my life. 40 years of labor, every sacrifice cemented into those walls. And now, because Jason hadn't lifted a finger, because Melissa had coasted on entitlement, because they had laughed instead of listened, those walls were crumbling. But what pierced me deeper was this: someone wanted me to know. Someone had slipped the notice under my door. The next morning, I dressed carefully and went straight to the bank. Mr. Ryan, my longtime account manager, met me in his office with furrowed brows. Mrs. Parker, he said softly, after reviewing the document, this is legitimate. Your daughter and son-in-law have failed to pay the mortgage. The house is weeks from being seized. I leaned back, my breath sharp. But I gave them 1 month. I left enough for December's payment. He nodded. It appears those funds were diverted. Diverted? His eyes tightened. Withdrawn in cash, not applied to the mortgage. I didn't need to ask who had withdrawn it. Jason's smirk, Jason's laziness, Jason's endless job search flooded my mind. So he stole it, I said bitterly. Mr. Ryan hesitated, then said carefully, it would appear so, yes. The anger that rose in me was hotter than anything I'd felt at Thanksgiving. Mockery was one thing, theft was another. That evening, Melissa called. Mom, I need to see you, she said, her voice hoarse. I hesitated, but agreed to meet her at the park near my apartment. She arrived with tired eyes, a crumpled jacket, her hair unbrushed. She looked smaller, diminished, a shadow of the woman who had once strutted around my house as if it were her own. They're taking the house, she blurted before even sitting down. I know, I replied quietly. Her head snapped up. How? I held her gaze. The notice was slipped under my door. Melissa blinked. For a second, confusion crossed her face, then fear. Who would? Jason, I said flatly. He took the money I left you. He didn't pay the mortgage. Did you know? Her mouth opened, then closed. Shame flickered in her eyes. I didn't want to believe it. He said he was handling it. Melissa, I said sharply, you're the one who should have handled it. That house was my life's work, and you let him run it into the ground. Tears welled in her eyes. Mom, please. I'm begging you. The kids, they need stability. If we lose the house. You already lost it, I cut in. My voice was cold, harder than I intended, but it was the truth. Melissa buried her face in her hands, her shoulders shaking. For a moment, the mother in me wanted to reach out, to comfort her. But another part of me, the stronger part, knew comfort wasn't what she needed. She needed reality. The following week spiraled into chaos. Jason stormed out of the house one night after a shouting match with Melissa, slamming the door so hard the frame cracked. Ethan and Sophia huddled together, frightened. Melissa, drained and furious, called me at midnight, her voice breaking. Mom, I can't do this. He's useless. He took everything and left us with nothing. Her words burned, but I forced myself to stay calm. Then stop depending on him. Stop depending on me. You have to stand on your own, Melissa. I can't, she whispered. I don't know how. That was the truth at the core of it all. She didn't know how because I had never let her learn. I had carried her, shielded her, given her everything. And now, when the world demanded responsibility, she was paralyzed. Meanwhile, my new life grew stronger. At the apartment complex, I found myself surrounded by women with stories not unlike mine. Rosa invited me to join her morning walks. Carmen introduced me to the community center, where seniors gathered for book clubs and painting classes. Patricia, a widow, shared coffee with me on her balcony, telling me how she rebuilt after her husband's debts nearly destroyed her. In their stories, I found pieces of my own reflection. I wasn't alone. I wasn't the only woman cast aside, mocked, erased, and together, we weren't victims, we were survivors. For the first time, I wasn't just escaping the past. I was building a future. But Melissa wasn't finished. One rainy Thursday evening, she appeared at my door again, drenched, her hands trembling. "Mom," she whispered, "I left him, Jason. He's gone." I let her in this time. She sat at my small table, dripping rainwater onto the floor, clutching her bag like it was the only thing she owned. "I couldn't do it anymore," she said, her voice hollow. "The drinking, the lying, the stealing. He left us with nothing, Mom." I studied her carefully. There was no smugness now, no arrogance. Just a broken woman who had finally reached her edge. "Where are Ethan and Sophia?" I asked. "With Lisa," she said quickly. "For tonight, I didn't want them to see me like this." For the first time in months, I felt a shift. Melissa wasn't just begging for money, she was admitting defeat, she was confessing her failure. But was it growth or just another layer of desperation? I poured her tea, watching her hands shake as she held the cup. "Mom," she whispered, "I don't know how to live without you." The words twisted in my chest. They were raw, honest, but honesty wasn't enough. "You don't need me," I said softly. "You need yourself, and until you find her, the woman inside you who can stand, who can fight, you'll always fall." She looked at me with wet, desperate eyes. "But what if I can't? Then you'll lose everything," I said gently. Her tears fell harder. She buried her face in her hands. And I, though my heart ached, didn't reach across the table. Not yet. Over the next days, Melissa tried. She applied for more shifts at the store. She asked Lisa for help with the children. She called the bank, begging for extensions. She even began selling furniture piece by piece, trying to cover debts Jason had left behind. I watched from a distance, torn between pride and sorrow. She was finally moving, finally standing, but only because she had been forced. The foreclosure loomed, and I couldn't shake the question. Had Jason left for good, or was he waiting, circling, ready to strike again? The knock still echoed in my ears when I opened the door and found Jason standing there. He looked nothing like the smooth-talking man Melissa had once married. His hair was unkempt, his shirt wrinkled and stained, his eyes bloodshot. A bitter smell of alcohol clung to him like a second skin. But worst of all was the smirk curling on his lips, a smirk that told me he thought he still had control. "You think you can just walk away, Eleanor?" His voice was low, dangerous. "You think you can ruin me?" I tightened my grip on the doorframe. "Jason, you ruined yourself." He stepped closer, shoving a folded document in my face. "The house is gone because of you, because you pulled your money, because you left us." "No," I said sharply. "The house is gone because you stole the money I left for the mortgage. You chose liquor and lies over responsibility. Don't you dare put this on me." His smirk faltered, but only for a moment. He leaned in, his voice a hiss. "You think you're clever, cutting us off. You think you're teaching us a lesson, but let me make something clear: you're not free of me. Not yet." I felt a shiver crawl up my spine. I wanted to slam the door, to shut him out, but I refused to show fear. "Get off my property, Jason, now." For a second, his eyes narrowed. Then he laughed a cold, empty laugh. "You'll regret this, old woman." And just like that, he turned and staggered down the hall, leaving the folded document on my doorstep. I closed the door and locked it, my hands shaking as I unfolded the paper. It wasn't a foreclosure notice, it was worse. Petition for guardianship. Jason had filed papers claiming I was incompetent, unfit to manage my own finances. If approved, he or Melissa, by extension, could gain legal control over everything I owned. My savings, my accounts, even my right to decide where I lived. My knees buckled. I sank into the chair at my table. staring at the words, guardianship. It was the very fate they had whispered about at Thanksgiving. The nightmare of every aging woman that her independence, her dignity, could be stolen with the stroke of a pen. I pressed my hands against my chest, breathing hard. They weren't just mocking me anymore, they were trying to erase me. The next morning, I was in David Lewis's office, the petition trembling in my hands. He scanned it quickly, his face darkening. "Mrs. Parker, this is serious. If the court believes you're mentally unfit, they can strip you of your rights. It's one of the harshest legal tools in the system." My voice cracked. "But I'm not unfit. I'm sharper than I've ever been." "I know," he said firmly. "And we can prove it. We'll petition for an independent evaluation. We'll bring in witnesses, neighbors, your bank manager, even your community center if needed. We'll show the court you're fully capable." "But Jason," I began. "Jason is desperate," Lewis cut in. "And desperate men make reckless moves. This is his attempt to claw back control. If we fight, we can win. But you have to be ready. It won't be pleasant." I swallowed hard, the weight pressing down on me. Courtrooms, lawyers, my own daughter possibly standing against me. It felt unbearable. But then I thought of the Thanksgiving table, the laughter, the whispers, Jason's smirk. "I'm ready," I said. Over the next week, I prepared. Lewis arranged for a medical evaluation, and the doctor confirmed what I already knew. I was healthy, alert, fully competent. I gathered letters from neighbors Rosa, Carmen, Patricia, all attesting to my independence. Mr. Ryan at the bank wrote a statement affirming I managed my accounts meticulously. Every document, every signature, was a shield against Jason's attack. But in the quiet moments, fear still gnawed at me. Guardianship was not just paperwork. It was a weapon, used by families to silence the elderly, to strip them of power under the guise of protection. I had seen stories on the news, women like me, losing their homes, their voices, everything. I refused to be next. Meanwhile, Melissa called me repeatedly. "Mom, I didn't know Jason was filing those papers," she insisted. "I swear I didn't." But could I believe her? She had stood by him before. She had laughed with him. She had whispered about nursing homes. Trust was a fragile glass, and ours had already shattered. One evening, she came to my apartment again. Her eyes were swollen from crying, her hands twisting together nervously. "Mom," she whispered, "I'm begging you don't hate me for what he's done. I left him. I'm not with him anymore." I studied her face, searching for truth. "Melissa, if that's true, then you need to prove it. Stand with me in court. Testify that I am capable, that Jason is lying." Her eyes widened. "In court? Against Jason?" "Yes," I said firmly. "If you want me to believe you've changed, if you want me to even consider letting you back into my life, then you must stand with me." She hesitated, fear flickering across her features. But then, slowly, she nodded. "I'll do it." The court date arrived on a gray Monday morning. I dressed carefully, my pearl earrings gleaming, my back straight. Rosa and Carmen accompanied me, their presence a quiet strength at my side. Inside the courtroom, Jason sat with his lawyer, his smirk plastered back on his face. Melissa sat behind me, pale and nervous, her hands clutching a tissue. The judge entered. The case began. Jason's lawyer painted me as a frail, confused old woman. He claimed I wandered, forgot names, couldn't handle finances. He cited the foreclosure as proof of my incompetence. Jason nodded solemnly, pretending concern. My chest burned with rage, but I stayed silent until it was my turn. Lewis rose, presenting the medical evaluation, the bank statement, the letters from neighbors. One by one, witnesses spoke. Rosa testified to my daily walks and sharp conversations. Mr. Ryan explained my detailed account management. The doctor confirmed my excellent cognitive health. Finally, Melissa stood. Her voice trembled, but she spoke clearly. "My mother is the most capable person I know. If she hadn't left us, we'd still be lost in her shadow. Jason is lying because he wants her money. I won't let him do it anymore." Her words cut through the courtroom like light through darkness. Jason's smirk faltered. The judge leaned forward, his gavel poised. "It is the decision of this court that Mrs. Eleanor Parker is fully competent. Petition denied." The gavel fell. The sound echoed like thunder. I exhaled, relief flooding me. I had won. I had defended not just my money, but my very existence. Jason stormed out of the courtroom, his face red with fury. Melissa collapsed into a chair, sobbing quietly. I walked out with my head high, the weight of fear finally lifting. The note lay on my kitchen table like a ticking bomb. "This isn't over, you'll see me again." I stared at the words until they blurred. Jason wasn't done. The courtroom defeat had only humiliated him further, and I knew men like him didn't walk away quietly. They struck back harder, uglier. I thought about calling the police, but what would I say? That my unstable son-in-law had left me a threatening note? They would shrug, tell me to call if he escalated. The system never acted until blood was spilled. I folded the paper, slid it into a drawer, and locked it, but the unease lingered, seeping into the corners of my apartment like smoke. For a week, Jason didn't appear. Melissa called me every night, her voice fragile. "Mom, are you safe?" she'd ask. "Yes," I lied, though I checked the locks 3 times before bed. "I don't know where Jason is," she continued. "He hasn't called me. He hasn't tried to see the kids. He's gone." I could hear the relief in her tone, but also the guilt. She had chosen him once, over me. Now she was learning what that choice had cost. "Melissa," I told her one evening, "you don't need Jason to survive. You need to learn to stand." "I'm trying," she whispered. "But Mom, what if he comes back?" I had no answer. One night, returning from the grocery store, I sensed something was wrong the moment I stepped into the building. The hallway smelled faintly of cigarette smoke, sharp and acrid. My neighbors didn't smoke. My chest tightened. I walked slowly toward my door, my shopping bags heavy in my hands. And then I saw it. The lock had been tampered with. Scratches gouged the metal, fresh and raw. I froze. The bag slipped from my fingers, oranges rolling across the hall. Jason. It had to be Jason. I forced myself inside, heart pounding, checking every corner of the apartment. Nothing was missing. But the air felt disturbed, like someone had breathed my oxygen, touched my things, invaded my sanctuary. I called David Lewis immediately. "He's escalating," I told him, my voice shaking. "First the note, now this." He tried to break in. David sighed heavily. "Eleanor, we need to involve the police, file a report, build a paper trail. And if they don't take it seriously," I asked bitterly, "then we keep pushing until they do. You're not alone in this." The police came. 2 officers, young and tired, clipboard in hand. "Could have been kids," one said, examining the scratches. "Pranks." "It wasn't kids," I snapped. "It was my son-in-law. He's threatened me before." The officer exchanged a look with his partner. "Do you have proof it was him?" I held up the note. "Is this enough?" They took it, nodded vaguely, and promised to keep an eye out. When they left, I felt smaller than before. The system was a sieve, and I was slipping through the cracks. Melissa visited the next day, her face pale when she saw the lock. "Oh my God," she whispered, "he really did this." "Yes," I said coldly, and the police barely blinked. Tears welled in her eyes. "Mom, I can't undo what I did, siding with him. But please, let me help you now. Let me move in with you, at least until it's safe." Her words pierced me. For years, she had treated me like the unpaid servant, the invisible matriarch. Now she wanted to come under my roof again, but this time for protection. I studied her trembling hands. She looked smaller, fragile, like the child I had once carried through storms. "All right," I said softly. "But understand this, Melissa, if you live here, it's not as a child waiting for rescue. It's as a woman taking responsibility. Do you understand?" She nodded quickly. "I do." Having her back in my apartment was both strange and comforting. She cleaned without being asked, cooked simple meals, even repaired the curtain rod that had been loose for weeks. At night, we sat together in silence, the weight of years between us. Slowly, she began to talk. "Do you know why I stayed with him?" she asked one evening, staring at her tea. "Because you thought you couldn't stand on your own," I replied. She looked at me, startled, then she nodded. "Yes, he made me believe I wasn't enough, and when you stepped in, paying bills, solving problems, I leaned on both of you. It was easier than growing up." Her honesty stung, but it also healed. For the first time, she was admitting the truth. "Melissa," I said gently, "life isn't about easy. It's about dignity. You gave yours away. Now it's time to take it back." She wiped her eyes. "I want to. I really do." But Jason wasn't finished. One Friday night, as Melissa and I ate dinner, a loud crash shattered the silence. Glass, shattering. We rushed to the living room. The front window was smashed, shards glittering across the carpet. A brick lay in the center, wrapped in paper. Melissa picked it up with trembling hands. Written in black marker were the words, "Next time, it won't be a brick." My stomach turned to stone. Melissa's face went white. "Mom, we have to leave. He's going to hurt you, hurt us." "No," I said, my voice steady despite the terror crawling under my skin. "I'm not running from my own life." "Then what?" she cried. "Wait until he kills us?" I lifted the brick, heavy and cold. "No, we fight back." David Lewis moved quickly once we told him. With the police report, the note, the attempted break-in, and now the brick, he pushed for a restraining order. It wasn't immediate. Nothing in the system ever was. But within days, the court granted a temporary order. Jason was forbidden from approaching me or Melissa, from contacting us in any way. The paper was a shield, flimsy but real. Melissa taped a copy to the fridge. "Do you think this will stop him?" "No," I admitted, "but it gives us ground to stand on when he crosses the line again, and he will. Because men like Jason didn't stop until someone forced them to." The following week was tense but quiet. Melissa and I settled into a rhythm, cooking, cleaning, even laughing sometimes. For a fleeting moment, I felt the warmth of family again, not the old toxic kind, but a fragile new beginning. Then came the phone call. It was Martha, my cousin. "Eleanor," she said urgently, "I just saw Jason. He's asking around town about you. He's furious. He said something about making you pay. Please be careful." I thanked her, my chest tightening. Jason was circling like a wolf, locked out legally but hunting for another way in. That night, I dreamed of Frank. He stood in our old house, suitcase in hand, walking out the door while I begged him to stay. His face melted into Jason's smirk, and I woke drenched in sweat. Melissa sat at the table, sipping coffee, her eyes tired but alert. "We can't live like this," she whispered, "always waiting for the next blow." "No," I agreed. "We can't, which means we don't just defend, we strike." She frowned. "What do you mean?" "I mean we gather every piece of evidence, every witness, every ounce of truth, and we make sure Jason can never touch us again. Not with threats, not with lies, not with anything. We end this." Melissa's eyes widened. For the first time, I saw not fear in her, but determination. "I'll help," she said firmly. The text glowed on my phone like a live fuse. "You'll regret going to court." Melissa sat across from me, her hands tightening around her coffee mug. Her knuckles were pale, her voice trembling. "Mom, he's not bluffing anymore. He's going to do something." I forced myself to breathe evenly, even though the weight of fear pressed against my chest. "Then we'll be ready," I said, my voice sharper than I felt inside. That night, neither of us slept. Every sound outside the apartment made us tense. Shadows moved across the walls like warnings. For days, the air itself felt electrified, charged with the certainty of something coming. David Lewis called every morning, steady but serious. "Keep documenting everything," he repeated. "If he escalates, we will bury him with evidence. You're stronger than you think, Eleanor." I clung to those words like armor. 3 nights later, the storm broke. It was nearly midnight. Melissa and I sat on the couch, a muted television flickering in front of us, the silence heavy. Then, 3 knocks rattled the door. Slow, deliberate, measured. Melissa's eyes widened. "Mom," she whispered, her whole body rigid. I stood, heart hammering. I walked to the peephole and looked out. My blood turned to ice. "Jason." He stood swaying slightly, eyes wild, a sneer twisting his face. In his hand glinted something metallic, a crowbar. Melissa gasped when she saw me stiffen. "Is it him?" "Yes," I whispered. "Call the police." She grabbed the phone with shaking hands while I pressed my back against the door. Jason knocked again, harder this time. "Open up, Ellie," he called in a mocking sing-song. "I just want to talk." Another slam shook the frame. My breath caught, but I forced myself to stay calm. "Jason, leave now. There's a restraining order. The police are on their way." He laughed, a jagged sound that scraped the hallway walls. "Police? You think they scare me? You think a piece of paper can stop me? He slammed the crowbar against the door, the impact reverberating through my bones. Melissa was crying now, speaking quickly into the phone. Yes, he's here, he's trying to break in. Please hurry. Jason's voice dropped lower, venomous. You think you can humiliate me in court? Make me look weak? You'll regret this, Eleanor. You'll both regret this. The next blow cracked the wood. I closed my eyes for a moment, praying silently, Lord, keep us safe, give me strength. Sirens wailed faintly in the distance. Jason froze, then banged the crowbar one final time before spitting on the floor and backing away. This isn't over, he hissed and vanished into the night. When the police arrived minutes later, the hallway was empty, the door splintered but still standing. Melissa sobbed as she told them what happened. I handed over the crowbar marks, the threats, the texts, the note, the mountain of evidence I had been saving. One officer finally looked at me with something like respect. Ma'am, he said, you've built a solid case. He won't slip through this time. But I didn't feel relief yet. Not until I knew Jason was truly gone. 2 days later, the call came. Jason had been arrested outside a bar, drunk, carrying the same crowbar. He was charged with violating the restraining order, harassment, attempted break-in, and intimidation. He was being held without bail. Melissa collapsed into a chair when I told her, her face in her hands. It's over, she whispered. Mom, it's finally over. But it wasn't just over, it was transformed. In the weeks that followed, our lives slowly stitched themselves back together. Melissa found a job at a community center, working with single mothers. She told me it made her feel like she was giving back, like she was finally standing on her own. The children returned from Martha's, older somehow, their eyes clearer, more responsible. They hugged me tighter than before, as if they finally understood I wasn't an invisible shadow, but the foundation they had always stood on. For me, the days grew gentler. I tended to my plants, walked in the park, cooked meals only when I wanted to. My home became mine again, not a place of servitude or fear, but a sanctuary. Yet healing wasn't just about peace, it was about clarity. And clarity meant facing truths I had long buried. One evening, Melissa and I sat on the balcony watching the sunset paint the sky gold. She turned to me, her eyes moist. Mom, I don't deserve your forgiveness. I let him turn me against you. I mocked you. I treated you like you were disposable. How can you ever forgive me? I reached for her hand. Melissa, forgiveness isn't about erasing what happened. It's about choosing not to let the pain rule us anymore. I forgive you not because you earned it, but because I need to be free. Tears rolled down her cheeks. I want to spend the rest of my life proving I can be the daughter you deserve. I smiled softly. Then start by being the woman your children deserve. That night, I felt lighter than I had in years. Jason remained in custody as his trial loomed. David Lewis assured us the case was strong. He'll face real consequences this time, he promised. He won't walk away unscathed. But I realized something important. Even if Jason disappeared forever, the real victory wasn't his punishment. The real victory was reclaiming myself. For decades I had been the invisible woman, the servant, the ghost, the burden. Now I was Eleanor Jenkins, a survivor, a mother, a woman who had finally learned her worth. The day of Jason's trial arrived months later. I walked into the courthouse with my head high, Melissa by my side. He sat shackled at the defense table, eyes hollow, his swagger gone. For the first time, he looked small. When the verdict came guilty on all charges, Melissa squeezed my hand until it hurt. Jason was sentenced to years in prison, barred from contacting us ever again. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed. Miss Jenkins, what do you want people to know about your story? One asked. I paused, then answered clearly. That silence is not strength, that love does not mean abuse, and that it is never too late to reclaim your dignity. Flashbulbs popped. Melissa wiped her tears, and for the first time, I felt the weight of my story transforming not just for me, but for others who had lived invisible lives too. Life afterward wasn't perfect, scars remained, but my apartment became a place of laughter instead of fear. The children grew into teenagers who respected boundaries, who helped with chores, who valued hard work. Melissa kept her promise, standing tall in her own life, proving with each day that redemption was possible. And I, at 70, found a kind of freedom I never thought I'd know. On my birthday, surrounded by new friends from the park and by family who had finally learned gratitude, I raised a glass. To new beginnings, I said, to dignity, to love that heals instead of wounds. The room echoed with agreement. As the candles flickered on my cake, I looked around and realized the truth. Jason's threats had once defined my fear, but my courage had defined my future. And as the flame of each candle went out, one thought burned brighter than ever. I will never be invisible again,